90% of children like ice cream, and I would instantly assume that all children now hate all ice cream and would prefer to eat a bucket of gravel mixed with dead badger. They could publish an official poll saying that 10 out of 10 cats prefer cat food to being whacked with a tennis racket, and I would assume that all cats have gone vegan and were queuing up outside Wimbledon meowing, choose me, choose me.
I trust these polls as much as I trust someone recommending a movie that they watched during a breakup.
Your judgment is impaired, Sally. I'll make my own decisions.
I trust those polls as much as I would trust Mary Kelly if she came up to me and said, "Congratulations, Andy, you've just won a free holiday to the south of France in the back of this windowless van."
I think official polls are like the unsolicited dick pics that the government provides us. I didn't ask for it, I don't believe it, it's on an angle, you've artificially inflated it ahead of time, and anyone that falls for one deserves all the disappointment of trying to match it to reality. These polls are absolute rubbish, Andy. I read one the other day that said the plumbing in London was good, and it... Absolutely is not. I mean, what, we have this technology now where they can spy my every bowel movement. There's a CTOS camera installed inside my underwear drawer. A media drone is scaring the birds off my garden bird feeder, and you can't get me consistently hot water.
Speaking of media drones, I mean, they're everywhere, clearly. The great thing, I guess, about media drones is that, as inanimate robots, they actually have more humanity, compassion and dignity than the human journalists we used to have to put up with, and a much more accurately calibrated moral compass. But it's the intrusion I can't stand, Alice. I'm in showbiz. Look at me here in this windowless dungeon. I'm in showbiz, and it's terrible for me, all these drones, knowing I'm being filmed all the time. Every day I have to make sure I've done my hair and makeup and not wearing clothes I've ever worn before. I'll have crosses to bear.
At this point, they've installed so many CTOS cameras, I'm not sure where they'll put the new ones. On top of the old ones, just cameras watching other cameras, like a social media influencer so self-absorbed they don't know how to sleep without turning it into monetized content.
I think that's the logical end of all society, isn't it? Where just everything has just become a camera filming another camera. To be honest, I've just given up on all news and reality now, Alice. I just, in fact, I now just make up my own headlines these days. I get a piece of paper and a pen, remember them? Paper and pens, those were the days. And I'll just write down the headlines I want to read. Now, I'll just make my own newspaper. Look, here I've got today. If you point at the bird shit on your car window and say it's a currency, no one can tell you otherwise. Screams Chancellor at Bilderberg karaoke night. That's right, another headline. Here we go. PM announces Britain back on track after swapping all Crown Estate properties for some magic beans. Might as well, we've got to do something as the nation we are today. Here's another one. Wild joy on the streets as Britain signs £864 zillion trade deal with Bolivia. There we go. Build a better world. Government claims only nice people will benefit from agreement to sell trampolines, mermaids and warships to landlocked South American nation. We're building a better Britain. Here's another one. Environment probably fine, claims drowning scientist. Invent the world you want to have, people. It's going to be way, way better than the one you've actually got. From the bug, goodbye. From the Buccaneer, this is the bug.
Coming up in today's episode of The Upload, we're talking about how Bagley managed to conquer London. Pretty much my favourite topic. I could talk for hours about the rise of the AI system. It's easy to forget about its origins. It's so present everywhere we go now. Bagley just kind of blends into the background.
Bagley is the service AI that's present in every Optic device. Whether you're using the Optic, Bagley will be there. The AI is streamed to your Optic from Bloom's Central Command Center, and it was first created by Sky Larson, our tech hero, as part of her techno-utopian idea for the world. Why do you think it grew so quickly?
In my mind, it's no surprise that Bagley became so popular. It's funny, useful, fast. It's a great companion and really just makes life so much easier. I mean, when you look back at all the service AIs that used to exist, they just can't compete. When you ask Bagley anything, there's a quick answer and loads of information available to you. One day, I let Bagley answer all of my messages for a whole 24 hours and no one even noticed the difference.
The other competitors really just couldn't compete with Bagley. Their answers were so much worse, they didn't understand anything, and Bagley pretty much gets everything right first time. Do you have any idea why Bagley really beat all the competition?
Well, it's really the data, isn't it? Ever since Broker hooked up with Bloom, that's when things changed.
And really, that's not actually that great. Bloom has data on everybody. They collect information about everything you're doing across the web through your optic headset. Isn't the AI only good because of Bloom surveillance?
Well, I suppose so, but I'd prefer not to talk about that side of things. Bagley is so special because it's been trained on this huge cache of information. That's how these AI systems work, or at least used to work. I mean, we don't really know that much about the latest version because there's very secrecy around the tech. But they're giving us huge amount of training data. It's a huge database to teach the AI about patterns in behavior. You know, so if you always travel the same way to your house, it can predict when you're going to go and get a self-driving car ready for you before you even ask for it.
That's pretty terrifying. In some ways, I don't want this data to drive my life. It understands too much at times. Have you heard one of the rumors around Jonathan of Bagley? I've heard of getting used by Jonathan. I wouldn't say it's Jonathan. It's pretty well known that they're not coming from Bloom. But the idea is that I wonder what I could actually make it do.
That looks expensive.
Shit, you okay? Let me help you.
Call 999! We have someone hurt here! Shit! Let me get help! Shit! Call an ambulance!
999, I need to report an emergency. We need help here.
Person intentionally masking or otherwise obscuring their face from detection will be prosecuted. Yes, indeed.
The ground for this environment really got created when we had suddenly authoritarian politicians everywhere. Anything that threatened them or they disagreed with, they would call it disinformation. That's disinformation, that's fake news. And again, we got into a situation where nobody really believes anything. And the trouble is if you were telling the truth, it's very hard to get your message to cut through all of the noise of all of the disinformation that's there. So like, you remember Out on the Edges, there was this story about when they would take a house by force, they would take innocent infants and they would crucify them. And that's a great, fantastic, viral story. How do you counter that story? with the truth. The only way you can counter it is by saying, no, they didn't. And of course, no one wants to spread that story. No one wants to hear that story. They want to hear the sensationalism. They want to hear how people were victims of violence when in fact they weren't. Or they were victims of insurgent forces when in fact they weren't.
The news is a mystery. It's a battleground. Big media reports that are academic.
The media has, of course,
Let's make this quick, all right?
governments have controlled and influenced their popular speech. So,
All right, you want to die today?
media outlets to sell one kind of news, one kind of science news. Of course, the media has also become too role in methods of state control. I think what's happening now is perhaps even more concerning, where you see within pre-crisis Britain we had much more diverse voices in the media, but not.
Now with the GBB, you're really only seeing one brand of news and therefore only getting one truth. So people end up with a very biased and controlled idea of the reality and the world that we're actually living in. There was, of course, many concerns and many problems, but in a way there were some positive things that, like, not all information was coming from one place, and so you'd have kind of far-right media outlets developing and then left-wing media outlets developing to combat those and kind of challenge the mainstream newspapers, TV stations, radios, and make sure people were questioning the validity and truth of the information they were receiving. So whilst there was the digital afforded more fake information, it also makes us suspicious and skeptical of information and makes us question the information we're getting. And I think in pre-crisis Britain it might not have seemed great at the time, but there was something positive about that there was a lot of distrust in the media and in the different kinds of truths that were being told. Whereas now I think you're seeing a return to a more traditional and older pre-digital sense, actually, of people just trusting what they're told, and that's why we have to be here with radio stations like this to challenge those conceptions. Most citizens feel pretty hopeless, I think, and unable to fight back against these kind of huge mainstream corporations that simply entrench and support the ideals and ideologies of the state. It can seem very hopeless indeed, but I think, you know, the fact that you're out there listening, we're in here talking, shows that there is still a space to combat these false truths and disinformation that's being sold to us, and that it's never possible really to completely shut down, despite all the technologies that they have at their disposal and all the financial and corporate power and all the physical power. That it's never quite possible to shut down people's desire to get to the truth and fight for their own ideologies and values, and you know, we're out here starting that path, so don't give up hope.
Contact with criminals is a punishable offense. Keeping you safe. Authorities are here. Anyone talking to the authorities is considered a snitch. Stay away from them, Albion fuckers.
May cause nausea, vomiting and headaches. You're listening to The Back, the Resistance comedy show brought to you by the Buccaneer Network. I'm Andy, joining me, as always, Alice.
I'm excited to be here. Apparently, the resistance is not going well.
Again? Well, there has been some news about DedSec, the resistance and/or terrorist organisation, delete according to delete according to whether it works for the government, service, Blue, Kelly, or Allen. According to a certain official, DedSec is no longer...